In this video, I'm going to celebrate the greatest middle distance runner of all time, who perhaps is the most genetically gifted, most disciplined, and best trained athlete of all time in any sport. Yes, he is the complete package to the extent of which we may never see again. His name is Hicham El Guerrouj of the great nation of Morocco. And we're going to cover his amazing career and world records that still hold today, 27 years later, even in the age of super spikes and track and field, where every other distance record has been taken down. No one has approached LG's times of 3 minutes 26.00 seconds in the 1500 meters and 3:43.1 for the mile. 3:43. Remember when breaking the 4-minute mile was the ultimate human achievement? Roger Bannister back in 1954. That's training pace for an athlete at the level of El Guerrouj. El Guerrouj is widely regarded as the greatest middle distance runner in history, and he still holds 6 of the 10 fastest times ever run in the 1500 meters, as well as 7 of the 15 fastest times ever run in the mile. He and Jakob Ingebrigtsen of Norway, the contemporary middle distance great, are the only men in history to have broken both 3:27 in the 1500 and 3:44 for the mile. El Guerrouj is the only man in history to have broken 3:27 in the 1500 meters more than once, and he's done so 5 times. He won a gold medal in the 1500 in the World Championships of Track and Field in 1997, 1999, 2001, and 2003. These are the championships that are held every other year around the Olympics, which are held every 4 years. And he won World Athlete of the Year, World Track and Field Athlete of the Year 3 times. That's across all the disciplines amongst all the athletes. But his story is not just championships and world records. We're also going to cover his very dramatic and tragic setbacks on the biggest stage, which is the Olympic Games. And these are rough. You're going to have a rough time watching this, and it brings me to tears every time that the level of disappointment and setbacks that this great athlete suffered, and his resilience and strength are so inspiring. That's why I want to highlight him on this video. I mean, the disappointments would break most every athlete, but instead they served as motivation for El Guerrouj to stay focused, continue on his path of training at the highest level that has ever been seen in middle distance running, and rise to the highest level of world sport, going out on top, ending his career at a high level, rivaled by anyone. You can talk about Michael Jordan winning his three-peat and then retiring, or Michael Phelps winning all the gold medals in swimming. So, if you're a runner, I think this video is going to inspire you like nothing you've seen before. If you're not familiar with the career of El Guerrouj, which was a different era, he retired in around 2005, so you might have missed him, especially if you're a young runner. And even if you're not a runner, if you're an athlete in another sport, or even if you're not an athlete, the insights about discipline, focus, dealing with adversity, and creating a lifestyle of total dedication to peak performance can be tremendously inspiring and life-changing. So here we go. I'm going to start you off with a video of El Guerrouj breaking the world record in the mile in 1999, a record that still stands. Here he is in Rome, Italy. Let's watch. Let's get to know the greatest of all time.
Of this mile race. There is also a $50,000 prize for anyone who establishes a world record. You just saw Kevin Sullivan of Canada in the yellow. He was jostled at the start line, and the former Canadian 1500-meter champion is now running second last as the pack moves through the turn. He wears competitor number 65. Sullivan and Graham Hood staged a great battle in the Canadian Championships over 1500 meters, and Sullivan indicated at the time that he did not plan to run in the Pan American Games, would instead race in Europe in preparation for the World Championships in Seville, Spain. A couple of pace setters out there leading the way for Hicham El Guerrouj.
El Guerrouj in third. The second of those pacemakers, Tanui of Kenya, the Olympic champion at 800 meters, a couple of Olympic Games ago. pushing the pace for 40 yards, 55.07, just about on world record pace. It's very important that these pacemakers not go out too fast. Equally, it's important that they don't slow the field down, and they're moving beautifully. And this high-class field already dropping back from the leading four, two of which are pacemakers. El Guerrouj, the world record holder in 1,500 meters, which he set on this track a year ago, is now trying to take away Nuruddin Morsali's mile record.
And Jeff, it's interesting you point out that on this very track, Hicham El Guerrouj set the record for 1,500 meters. When he ran that very fast time, he became the first man to average under 55 seconds per lap for the 1,500 meters. And he is running a very consistent mile thus far.
Yes, the pace is good. 880 yards, 151.58. That's good pace for a new world record. It's now very, very important that they do not lose pace on this third crucial lap. This is the lap which most people let down in slightly to get ready for the final 400 meters. They must not do this if they want to take away Nuruddin Morsali's world record.
One of the pace setters, Robert Kibet, dropping out, leaving it up to Tanui to lead the way for Hicham El Guerrouj. And it's interesting that staying with Hicham El Guerrouj is the 20-year-old from Kenya, Noah Nyan. He is staying right with Hicham El Guerrouj.
And with excellent credentials, Nyan has the 3 fastest 1,500-meter times in the world in 1999. So this young 20-year-old is not out of his class. Tanui has done an outstanding job as pacemaking and brings them to the bell. They've got to work very hard on this final lap, but it is possible. Guerrouj now leading, Nyan behind.
Tanui has dropped out. He did his job, as did Robert Kibet, the two pace setters. And now it is Hicham El Guerrouj going down the back straight, but he is unable to shake Noah Nyan.
So great to see an attempt on a record also being a race between two men. So often the world record challenger is out alone, having dropped the two pacemakers. But in this case, we have a real race on our hands. Nyan not giving way at all. This 20-year-old with the 3 fastest times in the world this year, not in any way humiliated by this great Moroccan runner, and sticks close to him coming off the turn with 100 meters to go. He's still there.
Nyan trying to move in on Hicham El Guerrouj. He's closing. Watch the time. The world record, 3:44.39. They race to the finish line. Hicham El Guerrouj is going to hang on. He's got a world record, 3:43.12. As a matter of fact, both El Guerrouj and Nyan went under the former world record time.
So how do you set a world record that holds for 27 years? You have great pacers. The pacers did their job. They have to run at an extremely precise split time per lap. Otherwise, there's no chance of a world record, right? If you go out a little bit too fast or a little bit too slow. All the world records in distance running, middle distance running, are achieved by running a very precise, accurate pace. You'll be amazed if you look up 5K split times of the world record in the marathon. They're coming in within seconds of each other, every little chunk of the marathon. And in the mile, of course, the 4 laps, you want to ideally even split those 4 laps, as you saw from some of the announcer split times, and that's how you bust the world record. It also helps that a young Kenyan, 20-year-old flash in the pan named Noah Nyan, he had an amazing career, winning gold medals, being right there with El Guerrouj as the 2nd fastest of all time in the 1,500 and the mile, but his career didn't last very long at all. So some guy chasing you when you're trying to bust the world record helps a lot. Of course, great weather, great conditions in Rome. And that's what's on the board still here as I make this video in 2025. As I mentioned at the outset, how can one athlete be considered the most genetically gifted, most disciplined, and best trained? Instead, what we see are examples of, quote, genetically gifted athletes that maybe waver in their work ethic or fall short of their potential for a variety of reasons. We see tons of these stories of the scrappers who have so much grit and dedication and they never give up. Maybe they don't have the genetic gifts. That's the linebacker in the NFL who's only 5'11", but he worked harder than everyone else in the weight room. So you have people that have some of those attributes, but it's tough to have all three. Especially, we see a lot of great athletes who have the gifts, they work hard, they make it to the top, and then they lose their edge, you might say, and they fall into the distractions of money and fame, and maybe perhaps having injuries or misfortunes caused by bad luck or caused by a flawed approach to training, where they kind of squander their genetic gifts without having that dedication and that focus that it takes to remain on top for a long time. So to set world records in middle distance events, the most hotly competitive events in all of sports, because it's so easy to have access to running a race, right? The fastest man in the world, they call the 100-meter runner Usain Bolt. Everyone in the world has an opportunity to compete in a sprint distance, and probably did at some point in their lifetime, such that we definitely have discovered the world's fastest man when we watch the Olympic track and field. And in middle distance, of course, here's a track. There's tracks all over the planet. Whoever can run the fastest, it's the most open forum for competition, unlike compare contrast to, say, Tom Brady's the greatest NFL quarterback of all time. That's fantastic, and congratulations to him. But look, there's only 32 teams in the NFL, so there's only about 70 professional quarterbacks in the whole world. So it's quite a bit different than looking at the 100-meter sprint and saying, okay, we're going to choose the fastest man on the planet or the fastest runner of the mile. And boy, to set world records that hold for a generation, that's when we're talking about something special that has each of those aforementioned attributes. I said maybe the likes of which we'll never see again, and that's because today it's virtually impossible for an athlete to be as focused on training compared to someone like El Guerrouj. We're going to detail his monastic lifestyle, he was called, because here we are in the digital age. These athletes have more presence and recognition and more ability to communicate and be seen behind the scenes than ever before. They're wealthy celebrity brands and cultural icons. Everywhere they go, they're being watched and potentially distracted from that total focus on their training, especially arduous, grueling training regimens like the endurance athletes have. And it kind of can easily bring you to a level of a lot of distraction, a lot of energy out that's not directly applicable to becoming a better athlete. It's so much so that today we kind of celebrate these occasions of binge focus that we hear about, where an athlete does dedicate themselves. Noah Lyles went off social media for 6 weeks before the Olympics so he could really focus. Good for him, but like in context, it's something that should be expected, right? Or you remember LeBron James many years ago. LeBron went on the ketogenic diet in the off season and lost 20 pounds of excess fat, so he's quicker and jumps higher than ever. Yeah, I'd expect that from a professional athlete too, to tighten up their diet. Oh, Jerry Rice, the great San Francisco 49er who had that 22-year career in the NFL, I believe, and he was so celebrated for in the off season. Jerry Rice doesn't goof around. He runs these punishing hell sprints, and he brings his teammates, and they're on their hands and knees all summer long getting ready for training camp. Yeah, you're getting paid all summer long too, so congratulations. But it's kind of funny to compare contrast the athletes of one era prior to this explosion of digital age and how dedicated they were in comparison. So I'm calling El Guerrouj perhaps the ultimate old school athlete, and maybe the last true old school dedicated focused athlete ever. There was a great feature story in a year 2000 edition of Sports Illustrated by Steve Rushin. And he said in the introduction to the article, quote, "We went out in search of the last unspoiled athlete on earth," end quote. And this was back in the year 2000. So the first section, I'm going to talk about his attributes in little chunks here in the video. And the first chunk I want to talk about is this old school, total focus, total dedication, monastic lifestyle. So here's this guy in the prime of his career, LG, as we nickname him, one of the richest citizens in the nation of Morocco, and perhaps the most famous, or at least the second most famous person in Morocco besides the king. And during his career, instead of cavorting about and celebrating his wealth and fame, he spent 11 months per year living in Spartan training dormitories with his teammates. So there's 30 million people in Morocco. LG is right there at the top. Maybe they have some soccer stars and a few other people who are at the highest level of celebrity recognition. In relative terms, this guy is more famous than Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods in a setting in the United States of America, but he's living in a dormitory for 11 months a year. About half the year was spent in the Moroccan National Athletic Training Center in the city of Rabat, and then many more months at a remote high-altitude training camp in the Atlas Mountains town of Ifrane. And here's a quote from the Sports Illustrated article about the training center in Rabat. Quote, "Running shoes air out on every windowsill. Although El Guerrouj's 2 rooms are warmly decorated, they contain few possessions. A stereo, a TV perpetually tuned to the music video Fun channel, and that ubiquitous Moroccan status symbol, an intricate rug. His remaining toys would fit in the cup holder of the average NBA rookie's Lincoln Navigator. In Rabat, he only ventures beyond the walls of his training complex on Sunday afternoons, but not always." El Guerrouj says, "For 2 weeks," he says with some sadness, "my parents were staying 300 meters from here, and I didn't visit them," end quote. And up in Ifrane, the article talks about how, quote, "even a wandering shepherd recognizes him, so El Guerrouj can't so much as sit unbothered in a cafe." Okay, so we're going to forward 20 years later. I'm having dinner in a Moroccan restaurant in Sacramento, and the owner is very nice. He comes over and checks on us. "How's your food?" We're sitting on those low seats, the low dining table and the cushion seats. And I say the food's fantastic. And I say, "Hey, by the way, do you know El Guerrouj?" And he goes, "Of course I know El Guerrouj." So this is 20 years after he retired, a random Moroccan American. Of course I know El Guerrouj. What a silly question. Anyway, back to the Sports Illustrated article. Craig Moshbach, former great American miler, and went on to be an executive and an agent in track and field. He says, quote, "It doesn't surprise me that a person who has run a 343 mile is living a somewhat monastic existence because of what it takes in terms of aerobic conditioning and sprint conditioning. The mile is at the meeting point of the marathon and the sprints, and it requires extraordinary discipline. At this level, the discipline required is super extraordinary," end quote. Yeah, if you're not familiar with middle distance running, the sprinters, I mean, those guys work hard too. You can watch them on YouTube now, those punishing workouts. A lot of them are training in the hot sun of Jamaica and Florida, and their hands are on their knees or they collapse after their last set. But their training sessions are, let's say, a couple hours, and then they're going off and living a somewhat more normal daily existence. Even the marathon runners, they're out there putting in 120, 130 miles a week, but it's hard to match or top an athlete who has to have that blistering speed to run a 343 mile, and also that extreme endurance required to maintain a fast pace for 4 laps. Interestingly, from exercise physiology research, the mile run is 79% contribution from the aerobic system, and the rest is anaerobic. So that is a large anaerobic component, anaerobic meaning the brief, explosive, powerful sprint type physiology, but 79% aerobic system means that these milers, and of course you watch on the video, these guys are skinny endurance freaks. They don't have that large muscle mass and that vision of explosiveness like you see with the 100 and 200 meter sprinters who are almost entirely anaerobic. So it is that hybrid athlete, as they talk about today, in a manner that the training is just absolutely mind-blowing. They are generally running well in excess of 100 miles a week as a miler. So a lot of that is the low-intensity jogging, you would call it, although they're running pretty fast when they're jogging. They're running 6-minute miles when they're jogging. And that grueling, punishing interval work where they're practicing running quarters in 55 seconds, which is near the record pace that you saw on the El Guerrouj video. Super extraordinary discipline indeed. And El Guerrouj talks about his life, his monastic life, 11 months a year in the training centers. "I'm happy with my life here," he says, seated in his dorm, picking at a breakfast of bread and boiled eggs. Athletics, that's what they call track and field around the world, people in America. Athletics, similar. Most people call soccer football in the world. So we call it track and field. The world calls it athletics. Athletics are supported by everyone in Morocco, and that is the source of my motivation, having a whole country behind me, end quote. And we are going to get deeper into that mindset in a moment. Recall me talking about the compare contrast to the modern athlete who's so distracted, always got their mobile device in hand, always engaging with their followers. And today, it's actually great because you get to know the athletes so much more. There's a great feature on YouTube called Workout Wednesday, put out by the Flow Track channel. And they travel around the country, mostly America, and they go and watch and film the great athletes doing their workouts. So you can actually see how they're preparing for the great championship competitions that you can excitedly watch on TV. I love it. But there wasn't a lot of that going on back in the turn of the century with El Guh-ROOSH. So here's a funny passage to compare to the digital age of today. To alleviate the loneliness of the middle distance runner, El Guh-ROOSH has occasionally ventured into cyberspace. Remember, this article was written in the year 2000, so we had the, I believe, dial-up internet at that time, even in Morocco, okay? Oh, if you didn't know what that sound effect was, you're probably younger than 30 years old. That used to be the sound made by the computer when you had to dial on a telephone line to connect to the internet. Let me try that again. Hello, welcome to AOL or whatever. Okay, little flash from the past for you older viewers. Back to the quote from the article. A computer-savvy friend recently toured several chat rooms with the runner at his side and actually sent El Guh-ROOSH's email address out over the internet. Of course, he received dozens of quick dispatches from his countrymen, nearly all of which read, indignantly, "We know that you're not the real El Guh-ROOSH." Oh, boy. Okay, talking about that focus, here's another great tidbit from the article with El Guh-ROOSH talking about his vehicle, a Honda CR-V. It only had 359 kilometers on the odometer. That's 222 miles. El Guh-ROOSH explains, "I only drive this car to and from Efrain, that's the high altitude training center. I am focused only on Sydney." That's the upcoming 2000 Sydney Olympics that he's referring to. "My car is only focused on Sydney," end quote. Okay, I think you got a picture from the rich language of Steve Rushin and the imagery of being at that training camp in Rabat. Now we'll go to the next section that I'd like to discuss, which are his amazing genetic gifts. And I talked about that requirement for the miler to be actually a pretty extreme endurance machine, 79% contribution of the aerobic system, even higher when you're talking about the 5,000 meters, which is 3.1 miles. That is also considered a middle distance competition. So the endurance runner needs a light, powerful, and very fast frame. El Guh-ROOSH stood 5'9" and 126 pounds. So he was a featherweight. If you saw these athletes in real life, you'll be shocked. Even today, you see him on TV. TV adds 20 pounds, right? They say that about the actors and everything. So these guys are very, very slight of frame. Small, light, fast, powerful humans. The reason why a light body weight is so important is that running speed is dictated. Here's our quick physics lessons for the day. It's dictated by vertical force production per stride divided by body weight. So how much force can you generate directly into the ground? That's why proper running form is landing over your midfoot with a balanced center of gravity so that you're generating force directly into the ground. You're actually not trying to run forward and impart force in front of you. That's a common misconception, and that's what you see with crappy running form. So it's all about staying tall and generating force into the ground, which will spring you forward. And the amount of force that you produce per stride is what dictates the length of your running stride. Wait, Brad, if you're talking about putting force vertically into the ground, wouldn't you just jump up and spring to the moon if you're trying to do so? No, because what you're fighting is gravity. That's why runners don't spring straight up into the air 15 feet when they're running. Instead, they spring forward For example, Usain Bolt in his 100-meter races had a stride length of 8 feet. Eliud Kipchoge, running the marathon world record time of 1 hour 59 minutes, his stride length for the marathon, I believe it was a little over 4 feet, which is pretty amazing to have a 4-foot stride for 26 miles. Average competent marathoner has a stride length of 3 feet, and the slow joggers, of course, their stride length is only a couple feet because they're not generating much vertical force into the ground. So, of course, a big, strong bodybuilder, and you can see funny videos on YouTube of a bodybuilder challenges sprinter in a short 60-meter sprint, they can impart a lot of force into the ground because of their musculature and their power. But if you weigh 247 pounds and you're trying to run a fast, even 100 meters, even 40 meters, you're going to be slower than a competent sprinter, whereby you see the sprinters, of course, are extremely low body fat, super ripped. A lot of them carry some significant musculature, but they're generally fairly lightweight in general terms. Trayvon Bromell, one of the great American sprinters, I believe stands like 5'9", 150 pounds. Noah Lyles, the 200-meter world champion, one of the greatest sprinters of modern era, I believe he's like 5'11", 165. Everything's pretty slight. So the athletes across all the track and field events are very, very lean, very ripped, and not carrying a lot of extra weight because of that critical component of vertical force production per stride divided by body weight. El Guerrouj's physique was even more adapted for running, and it was celebrated with this epic quote from Craig Mosbach, the miler American that we heard about from before. He says, "To some extent, we're talking about a machine," and the media really took this and ran with it, but I'm going to give it some proper perspective shortly. El Guerrouj has the cardiovascular system of a man 6'6". He has the legs of a man 6'2" and the upper body of a man who's 5'2". So that's about right for a middle distance runner. That's about ideal, or super freak ideal. You also hear about this laboratory value called VO2 max, volume of oxygen consumption that your body can consume when performing at near maximum intensity as a function of body weight. Again, so VO2 max is measured in milliliters per kilogram of body weight per minute. How much oxygen you can process in your body per minute divided by your body weight in kilograms. And now it's become a popular biohacking term and an exercise strategy to try to elevate your VO2 max or concentrate on your VO2 max, because the longevity research has shown that there's a direct correlation with an adequate or good or great VO2 max with longevity. And if you have a poor VO2 max, meaning that your body cannot process very much oxygen when you're trying to exercise at high intensity, you are in deep shit. I have an entire show about this, whereby if you actually fall below a VO2 max of 18 milliliters per kilogram per minute, it is pretty much your death sentence. You're going to die. And that's what we see from people who are old and feeble and can't get out of bed. They basically can't process enough oxygen per kilogram per minute to stay alive, the extreme example. And if you're talking about a general unfit citizen with a lot of excess body weight, you're going to have a very poor VO2 max calculation, as evidenced by becoming extremely winded climbing up a single flight of stairs. So you don't need to go into the laboratory to test this. You can climb upstairs and see how you do. And if one staircase is a big effort for you, boy, that is as good or better than any blood test, any doctor exam to indicate that you have very poor longevity prospects. So the idea of becoming better at consuming oxygen at high intensity per minute, it just means getting fitter, and there's no big magic to doing a quote VO2 max workout, a specially designed VO2 max workout. You hear a lot about the 4x4x4 is the best workout, meaning 4 minutes of going as fast as you can for those 4 minutes, resting for 4 minutes, doing it 4 times. All that stuff's fine and dandy, but VO2 max is kind of overrated. And the general takeaway, this is the summary of my hour-long show on the same subject if you want to hear more, but the general takeaway is get your VO2 max into adequate standard, by getting in shape any way you like. There's a whole bunch of ways to get fitter and get better at climbing stairs. It might be joining the adult basketball league if that's your thing and you've been missing out, going to the gym, lifting weights. All this stuff will improve your oxygen consumption per minute. But when you're talking about elite athletes who go into the laboratory and get tested, they invariably have elite VO2 max values. But once you get above, let's say, a score of 70 milliliters per kilogram per minute, you're in the elite category, and then the variation is not much of a big deal. You can get these glamorous media accounts of the outlying elite endurance athletes who have record VO2 max scores. The Norwegian cyclist Oscar Svensson was a 97. The contemporary Jonas Vingegaard, who's up there at the top of the Tour de France and the top cyclist in the world, he was reported to have a VO2 max of 97. The great Norwegian skier Bjorn Daly was a 96. The great Norwegian triathlete Christian Blumenfeld, 93. He also had an absolute oxygen consumption of 7.7 liters per minute, which was superior. Greg LeMond, the great U.S. cyclist, was 92. Look, that's great, but El Guerrouj's VO2 max was reported at 80, which is also a very elite level VO2 max. But interestingly, when I tested myself in 1987 at age 21 at Dr. Falsetti's prominent laboratory in Southern California, my VO2 max was 80.2, which was one of the highest scores ever seen. But I didn't break the world mile record that held for 27 years. So a little bit overrated when you're talking about VO2 max. Oh, and did you catch how many Norwegians I mentioned had among the highest VO2 max scores ever recorded? So in a country of 5.5 million people, that's slightly larger than the borders of the city of Los Angeles with around 4 million people. Could be a little suspect, you know what I mean? Anyway, lots of hype around VO2 max. Elite athletes have elite level VO2 max over 70. Once you get your VO2 max up around 50 or above, and of course we're talking age graded, so a senior citizen who has a VO2 max of 40 is outstanding. A young person with a VO2 max of 50 is outstanding. An elite athlete with a VO2 max of 70 is outstanding. Once you get it over that basic competency and have a good score, then it's really important to pursue other aspects of fitness, like your muscular strength and so forth, rather than obsess about VO2 max. Let's go to the next El Guerrouj attribute. So, the lungs of a guy 6'6" on a guy 5'9" are some pretty good hype and good sound bites for the media. And you will see superior genetics amongst the world record holders in the various sports. But it's important not to overhype this stuff to the extent of potentially even denigrating and not respecting the performance sufficiently. This happened a lot with the sprinter Usain Bolt because he was 6'5". So the casual viewer watching the 8 lanes of the Olympic final, and one guy is striding ahead of everyone and breaking the world record, and he happens to be way taller than everyone, you make the uninformed conclusion that, oh, look, he has longer strides than everyone, and therefore he has an advantage. And of course, that can be literally accurate, that he has longer strides. He has more vertical force production per stride for his 6'5" frame added onto that variable, such that he can break world records. But there's also short guys right next to him who are hundredths of a second behind. Johan Blake is the number 2 sprinter in history, Usain's teammate, that was chasing him to a lot of those world records, much, much shorter. So what's overlooked a lot with Usain Bolt's exploits and celebration of his performances was that he was also revealed to have one of the best techniques, one of the most precise and technically excellent techniques of any sprinter ever. There's a great video ranking the top 10 sprinters by the best technique of all time. And I believe Bolt got in there for ranking number 3. His countryman, Asafa Powell, was celebrated as having the best technique ever. Asafa got his ass kicked every time in the championship events by Usain. So it helps to be tall indeed, but it's a disadvantage coming out of blocks and accelerating up to speed because shorter limbs Shorter levers will help you accelerate quicker. Once you're up to speed, watch out, because a 6'5" guy who gets rolling with excellent technique and amazing vertical force production per stride, Bolt was found in research laboratory to impart 5 times his body weight into the ground per stride. So he's over 200-pound athlete. So he's generating 1,000 pounds of vertical force production into the ground with each stride. That's why his stride springs forward 8 feet. For most of us, that would be considered a long jump, but it's Usain Bolt's normal stride.
Actually allows for increased ankle bending. Now, increased ankle bending during this moment allows him to utilize the spring-like mechanism of his calves for increased power as he pushes off. Ability to do so requires good ankle mobility, which many people lack nowadays. As his back leg prepares for push-off, you can see how extended his hips are. This allows for increased engagement of the hip muscles, which is one of the main power generators during running. This also causes increased tension to occur at the hip flexors, which acts like an elastic band as it helps swing the leg forward as soon as the foot leaves the ground. The elite runners I've mentioned before, like Eliud Kipchoge, have this lean. If you calculate the angle of his body from his foot in this viewpoint, he presents with a lean of 21 degrees, which is more than most of the other elite runners I've analyzed before. This lean forward allows for improved forward momentum as well as increased utilization of the hip muscles and ligaments, which improves foot turnover and power generation from the legs. Compared to the long distance runners I've already analyzed though, he does present with more shoulder movement. One of the reasons why may be due to that with increased speed usually comes increased force generation from the legs. The increased rotation of the arms may be due to a result of the increased rotational force coming from the legs. If the rotational force from the legs is not counteracted properly, the body kind of goes out of whack and decreases force generation toward the desired direction. Now looking here at the upper body, in this view we can see rhythmic movement of the trunk. We can also see that he does present with some asymmetry. He presents with more trunk rotation to the left as well as a lean toward the left side, but some of this may be due to the nature of the track as he is running counterclockwise. Anyway, the trunk movement you see is more rotation than forward and backward movement. I've mentioned before that you want to stabilize the trunk, but you don't want it too stiff. This rotational movement allows for tension in the core to help stabilize the pelvis against the rotational forces acting upon it from the leg movement. This is similar to what I mentioned about the arms.
El Guerrouj also had beautiful running form, but what's interesting when you look at some of the clips from this video analyzing his running form was that he had significantly more rocking of the upper body than some other athletes who kind of run ramrod straight with beautiful, really stable torso. And we're oftentimes making these uninformed insights or recommendations to try to quiet some of that upper body movement and look more technically perfect. But this is a really good lesson watching El Guerrouj to realize that our bodies each have those individual particulars and our tendencies, and we make them work for us when we figure it out and try to understand what feels most comfortable for us rather than this obsession with technique. The science of the technique and coaching and video analysis, of course, is super, super important. But even in the most technical sports like golf, as my good friend and noted teacher Christopher Smith talks about a lot, it's not all about being a robot and mirroring the swing of some other great golfer. It's figuring out what works for you and your own natural athleticism and your own physical particulars, your level of flexibility in your trunk, your shoulders, everything goes into the equation. And for runners, El Guerrouj figured out this is what makes him feel most comfortable when he's knocking off 55-second 400-meter splits, breaking the world record. So you cannot see this as a flaw if it is exhibited by the world record holder. That is my plug here for finding some natural technique attributes rather than being obsessed with technical perfection. Oh, and what's hilarious about identifying the asymmetry in El Guerrouj's running stride is that it is calibrated toward counterclockwise running, which is the way that you run around a track. I learned an interesting tidbit recently. Do you know why all the track and field races are run in counterclockwise manner? It's because the natural human biorhythms have a counterclockwise nature to them. Our circadian rhythm and the electromagnetic fields of the earth have these counterclockwise attributes. That wasn't spoken very well, but I watched a whole video about it, and that was a reason why they switched track and field racing to counterclockwise perhaps a century ago, is to recognize that is more natural human inclination to run in a counterclockwise manner if forced to choose between clockwise and counterclockwise, right? It's also nice to run straight, but not when we're in a track and field stadium. So the asymmetry, we can calm down a little bit when we're talking about these things. They're not necessarily bad. Also, Usain Bolt had severe scoliosis of the spine. You can see it visibly when you watch him on a video walking around after the race. You can see that curvature of the spine. This made ground contact time with one of his legs more than the other. And we don't want high ground contact time when we're sprinting. So this could be perceived as a flaw, but it was simply the asymmetry of his body causing that. It didn't interfere with him running the fastest 100 meters to 200 meters of all time. So you got your 5'9" guy with 6'6" lungs, 6'2" inseam, and you have to go race against him. And he's also living that monastic lifestyle. So we're checking off some of these boxes. I should also mention the interesting compare and contrast to Michael Phelps' interesting article where Michael Phelps was 6'4". He had a wingspan of 6'7", so very long arms, but his inseam and his pants were 30 inches, which is the same as El Guh-ROOSH. So El Guh-ROOSH at 5'9" could swap blue jeans with Michael Phelps if he forgot his for the opening ceremony of the Olympics, the 6'4" guy. And when I saw the article, I'm like, that's my inseam, 30 inches, a 5'11" guy. So I'm kind of splitting the difference. Oh, I don't have those extreme freak genetic gifts for swimming or track and field. But at this point, for you young athletes watching or parents of young athletes watching, I don't want you to get too hung up on genetics. Here's a great article from Kaizen Academy, quote, "Genes do not determine your destiny." Hey, that's what we wrote in 2009 Primal Blueprint as the centerpiece premise of living a primal lifestyle. Genes determine your areas of opportunity. As physician Gabor Mate notes, genes can predispose, but they don't predetermine. The areas where you are genetically predisposed to success are the areas where your habits are more likely to be satisfying. The key is to direct your effort toward areas that both excite you and match your natural skills to align with your ambition and your ability. I love how that's characterized. And what they mean is like, it's okay to be a short guy and become obsessed with basketball and love it so much. And yes, you're probably going to play point guard. And no, you might not make it to the NBA if you only grow to 5'8" or 5'9" or whatever. But it's still okay. And you can excel at a very, very high level without worrying about whether you have the lung capacity of a 6'6" person when you're a 5'9" middle distance runner. Look at me. I have a lifelong background in endurance sports. That is very obvious that that's where my genetic gifts lie. My 80.2 VO2 max helped me tremendously when I was trying to train and compete at the highest level of global triathlon. But today I'm obsessed with the high jump and the 400 meters, which I have arguably very poor genetics for those events because that's a completely different type of athlete, especially a high jumper. If you watch the Olympic final, male and females, you see a bunch of very, very tall humans who are very skinny. There's no in-between people like me and my 30-inch inseam because it's a huge advantage to have your waist higher off the ground because your waist is the thing that you need to get over the bar. And then as skinny as you can be, the great modern high jumper Mutaz Essa Barshim was 6'3", 154 pounds. And that is going to give you a big advantage over a guy who's 5'11", 164 pounds, not to mention 60 years old, trying to jump over a much, much lower bar. But I don't care about any of that. I don't care about my genetic score. I am just out there working hard. And what's cool is that through the process of attrition, the other gifts that I possess are the devotion and passion for practicing. And so I'm still able to compete at age 60 and was so proud and excited after I turned 60 and jumped into the new high jump division to get the #1 world ranking in the high jump, jumping that bar of 5'1", which as a matter of fact, is better than my high school personal best of 5'0". So I'm a better high jumper now at age 60 than I was when I was a teenager. And when I was a teenager, my genetic gifts and my competency was so low that I couldn't even make the team. I was not even allowed to participate in the meets in high school, even though I loved to high jump back then, even because I wasn't good enough. We had guys at our high school competing in California State meet. We had a guy at 6'8" and another guy at 6'6" in the same high school, another guy at 6'3", another guy at 6'1". I couldn't even practice the high jump because the bar was too high. So I'd actually finish my middle distance training workouts, running those circles around the track until we're on our hands and knees exhausted. And then I'd head over to the high jump pit with excitement and practice with the girls at the end of practice. So whatever genetic attributes you possess right now, unless you're dead set on making the Olympics, yes, most of the gymnasts stand under 5'2" tall and all those things you see, the extreme genetic examples. But for the most part, it does not matter as much as we commonly chatter about and obsess about. So we covered his monastic lifestyle, we covered his genetic gifts, and now we're going to get into that key category of that competitive intensity and focus and that champion's mindset. And we're definitely going to accept that LG had the awesome genetics, but it wasn't such a difference maker as we want to think. Here's a case in point mentioned in the Sports Illustrated article. El Guerrouj had a brother who was 21 years old, and at the time he was mentioned in the article as the 12th best 1500-meter runner in the country of Morocco. And El Guerrouj's coach remarked, "It's difficult because at the same age, Hicham was number one in the world," end quote. And the people close to Hicham know the real truth about what made him the greatest champion beyond his lung capacity and his long legs and his skinny body. He had a physiologist named Hakim Omar. He was asked about El Guerrouj's unique gifts, and in his French-Moroccan accent, he responded in one word: discipline. El Guerrouj's teammate, Zahra Waziz, who was the silver medalist in the women's 5,000 meters in the 1999 World Championships, she said, quote, "But he is more than that, more than just discipline. In French, she says, he is très sérieux, very serious about his training." El Guerrouj's coach, Abel Kada, says, quote, "Hicham is very strong in his mind. I could not know when he was 14 years old that he would become world champion, but he became a professional. He goes on holiday for 1 month every year. The other 11 months, they are spent focusing on his dream," end quote. So we have that competitive intensity, that dogged will to win, but I think we also over-celebrate and over-obsess about these attributes to the extent that they're glorified when they really shouldn't be. And what I really want to focus on when talking about the El Guerrouj anecdotes is his even temperament, his healthy perspective, and his ability to recover from disappointment, as opposed to just that killer instinct and wanting to crush his competition. Because we really twist this the wrong way so often. It really bugs me. We worship these competitors who are showing that killer instinct, but oftentimes they are actually unbalanced humans, and they oftentimes leave a lot of trouble in their wake. We could be talking about Tiger Woods and all his foibles off the golf course, or we could be talking about the stories of Kobe alienating his teammates because he was disappointed that they didn't have his level of competitive intensity. I mean, here's the Lakers. I'm a lifelong Laker fan. They three-peat in the early 2000s. And then, the two superstars of the team, Kobe and Shaq, can't get along. Shaq leaves town, and we have the potential for the greatest dynasty ever, because they certainly could have gone on to win 3 more titles in a row. But instead, due to the clash of the egos and all the nonsense off the court, we bust up a dynasty. Doesn't make sense to me. I think it should be criticized more than celebrated. Same with Michael Jordan, and you watch the great documentary, The Last Dance, and see how obsessed Jordan was with winning, no matter what, if it was checkers or playing golf or winning the NBA title. But he also alienated and caused disturbance with his teammates who maybe weren't as confident and focused and driven as he was, and he was able to wear those teammates down, cause that unnatural and unnecessary tension on the team, which people thought, well, that's why they won, because they got in fights in practice sometime and it tuned them up and made them tougher competitively. I'm going to throw away that. A lot of that stuff is nonsense. Let's go back to El Guerrouj, and we'll talk about some of his setbacks shortly that really tested his character more than just being someone who really wanted to win and really wanted to train hard. A teammate, Waziz, says, El Guerrouj is helpful to everyone, and everyone loves him. And it's not because he's a champion. Other athletes become famous, and then they become unfriendly. We see it all the time. When Hicham became a world champion, we told him, we love you, don't ever change, and he hasn't. Coach Kata adds to this, quote, if he changed now, it wouldn't go down well with the group. He's very famous in the streets here, you will see. But what he maintains around the people is a good, in French, the word is comportement, comportment, how he comports himself. He's not too uppity, he's humble, and he has most amazing sportsmanship. I want to show you this clip from a race in Eugene, Oregon called the Prefontaine Classic 2001. They have this tradition every year. It's called the Bowerman Mile, this invitational mile where they bring in the greatest mile runners from all over the world, the top talent. And part of the tradition is they invite the #1 high school runner in the United States to compete against the pros, really for the first time, probably for the young kid, compete against the pros in the Bowerman Mile. And in this meet in 2001, they had the American high school sensation, Alan Webb, still the fastest high schooler of all time in America by far. And this is the race in which he breaks the high school record. Of course, we have the great champion, the greatest in the world, El Guerrouj racing. But look how El Guerrouj shares the spotlight with this high schooler from America, Alan Webb.
You cannot let Hicham El Guerrouj get this far ahead of you. And look at this. Alan Webb is making a push. It is the magic of Hayward Field or the adrenaline or the combination thereof. But Alan Webb is putting on a show. He may steal it. Hicham El Guerrouj coming away with this one. Hicham El Guerrouj from Morocco will cross the finish line unofficially 3:49.93. And for Alan Webb, has he done it?
It looks to me like Webb may have gone under 3:55. 3:55.3 is what we're looking at for Jim Ryan's high school record. He's gone well under 4 minutes. Hicham El Guerrouj runs under 3:50 outdoors, the first ever on American soil under 3:50. We're waiting for an official
and now
time.
They're saying maybe 3:53. Is that possible for Alan Webb?
He was awfully close to El Guerrouj. He was fourth in the race. Fourth place is 3:53.40. Webb 3:53.40.
He has done it.
Annihilates Jim Ryan's record.
Unbelievable. You know, there's so many people that said the kid could not do it. It's too early in his career. But you put him with the king, Hicham El Guerrouj, who runs a great race at 3:49.92, and the two will share a victory lap. How appropriate is that, Dwight? Unbelievable.
A record that has not been approached for 36 years. No high school miler has gone under 4 minutes in 34 years, and Alan Webb comes out here.
There's your winner, Hicham El Guerrouj. Fastest ever in America at 3:49.92. We talked to him yesterday about the possibility of doing that. A big smile came across his face, and he said, it is certainly something I'd like to do.
I mean, think about that. Here is the world's greatest flying across the planet with the crowd cheering for him, and he has the occasion or the sense to grab Alan Webb's arm and raise it, knowing the significance, even though when El Guerrouj was that age, he was racing in the world competition, but he knew and he sensed that it was a big deal to the Americans that this high school kid broke the record. It's just beautiful. And I think this character revealing insight that you see after the pre-classic and the insight from his teammates and coaches about his comportement becomes important when we discuss the absolutely mind-blowing setbacks and disappointments that El Guerrouj suffered in his career, even as he went on to become the greatest of all time. So we've checked those boxes, his competitive intensity and focus, and now we're going to get into his career timeline. So fasten your seatbelts. There are some ups and downs that are like no other athlete, I promise. He first appeared on the international stage in what they call junior competition. So this is big time global competitions for athletes under age 20. And you see the budding superstars invariably running in the World Junior Championships. And he was the number 2 man on the Moroccan cross-country team at the World Junior Cross-Country Championships. This is early 90s now. His first international result of note came at age 18 when he came in third in the 5,000 meters of the 1992 World Junior Track and Field Championships. Interestingly, he came behind the legend Haile Gebrselassie of Ethiopia, who went on to become the greatest long-distance runner of his generation, and many consider him still the greatest or one of the greatest of all time. So you see these kids racing around the track in 1992, headed toward absolute legacy greatness. El Guerrouj rose to international prominence in the mid-1990s with near record times in the 1,500 meters in the mile. Man, what an acceleration from a teenager. And then at age 20, he finished second in the 1,500 meters at the 1995 World Championships in Sweden, in the World Championships, not the young guys. He lost to his future nemesis from neighboring country Algeria, the world record holder at the time, the great Nourdine Morsalli. In 1996, after setting a new personal best in 1,500 meters in Sweden, 3:29, he was considered one of the favorites for the Olympic gold in the 1996 Atlanta Olympic Games. So we have this guy who's on the top of the heap, one of the greatest ever, Nourdine Morsalli from Algeria. He's busting all the world records. He's heading in the prime of his career to Atlanta to get another crowning achievement, going for that gold medal. And here comes the kid from down the street, Morocco to Algeria, North Africa. It's time for the Olympic showdown. So we have the favorite and we have the upstart, 21-year-old now, El Guerrouj is. And here is a very exciting race. We're going to cut in and see what happens in the 1996 Olympic Games 1,500-meter final in Atlanta.
And Cacho's the fast finisher. He won the Olympic title in a slalom race in Barcelona for the last lap of 51. Morsley now is under pressure. El Guerrouj is right there, and there he goes. Morsley about to be taken on, but he refuses with 400 to go, and El Guerrouj is gone. He's down. The bell is ringing. It's for the last lap, but nothing else. Morsley strikes for gold, and it's there for the taking now. Morsley, world record holder, 3 times the world champion, becomes the Olympic champion. Cacho loses his title but takes silver. Kip Carrera is in 3rd place.
He looks to the outside, he sees El Guerrouj, he throws an arm out because he feels, and then I thought Cacho did extremely well. Bailey ended up on the grass and the whole field was suddenly splintered apart. Nourdine Morsley had a chance, he took that chance, and there we just see the fall again. And look at the acrobats and look at the antics that went on. But look at him, El Guerrouj, he got up and he continued, and really, quite honestly, that would have been a fascinating last lap with all 3 of them in contention.
Oh man, it's so tough to watch because, you don't want that to happen. I don't care if you're a big fan of Algeria or United States or Morocco. You just don't want that to happen when you're watching the greatest in the world duke it out. You just feel that heartbreak, that sense of unfairness. And indeed, El Guerrouj was crying and disconsolate underneath the stands in Atlanta. Then, I guess we had early cell phones happening at this time. I think I remember that right around late 90s when the cell phones came in, because the athlete is crying and disconsolate underneath the stands, and he gets a cell phone call from who? The king, King Hassan II. And King Hassan tells him, quote, "El Guerrouj, do not cry. You are a champion in the eyes of the Moroccan people," end quote. El Guerrouj is asked about the phone call later. After the call by His Majesty, it was another El Guerrouj who was born. There is no similarity to the El Guerrouj before this call and the El Guerrouj right now. And oh my gosh, I remember that quote. It was so touching. Remember I talked about how he was driven and motivated by the 30 million people of Morocco behind him. The king got him off the mat, wiped those tears away, and boy, he had to get up, refocus, and get going to redeem himself. I remember another great quote from El Guerrouj about that incident. And what he said was, quote, "El Guerrouj will be back. One must never forget El Guerrouj." That was so beautiful that my big track fan and longtime coworker, Jeff Iron Montgomery, we said that to each other for some reason on a daily basis when we worked together at Champion Nutrition, because it was just so, it was intense, it was powerful. And nowadays the athletes really overuse this third person discussion, like, what team Ocho Cinco signs with is what's going to be best for Ocho Cinco, you know, all that kind of thing, where they refer to themselves in the third person with a sense of arrogance, and it doesn't come off that well, even though it's still happening all the time. That's a good question. Brad Kearns will have to think about that. You know what I mean? But I think it was so heartfelt and authentic coming from El Guerrouj. One must never forget El Guerrouj. Okay, that is what I would call a scary, scary, dangerous athlete who suffers that level of devastating setback, cries it out, gets up off the mat, and gets back to business. And what happens after his fall and tragedy in Atlanta? He goes on a frickin' tear like no other athlete we have ever seen in middle distance running. 1 month after the Atlanta Games, at the Grand Prix final in Milan, El Guerrouj became the first runner to defeat Morcelli over 1,500 meters in 4 years. So Morcelli on top, a 4-year win streak. Hey, little man that fell down at the final lap. Let's see what's going on in Milan. Yeah, kicking some ass after the Olympics. Then El Guerrouj became the only middle distance runner to win 4 consecutive world championship titles, as I described earlier, 97, 99, 01, and 03. No one has even come close to that record. Really, the world's is at the same level, or actually arguably at a higher level than the Olympic Games in terms of the quality of competition. Just because we have to represent so many countries in the Olympics, and the world's is all about these very stringent qualifying standards. It's a very, very prestigious title in track and field world, even though there's less public mainstream attention than the Olympics. 4 world titles in a row. He also busted those world records, as we learned, during this time gap between Atlanta and Sydney. So 1998 in Rome, he runs the 3:26.00, still holding today, 1,500 meters. He runs the mile in 3:43. It's the first time in over 40 years that 2 men bettered the world record in the mile in the same race. Remember El Guerrouj's buddy King Hassan II, who gave him the phone call after Atlanta to cheer him up? Well, he and, of course, the rest of the nation were watching El Guerrouj break that mile world record live from Rome. The king was watching from his royal palace, where he was actually battling a terminal illness at the time. After the race, the king turns to his bodyguard and says, "El Guerrouj a effacé Morcelli." That is the French word for erase, as in erase from the record books. Obviously, this is a huge deal because we're talking about these fierce political and athletic rivals having to do with Algeria and Morocco. 16 days after El Guerrouj broke the world record, the king died. As the legend goes, he was a contented man. So in total, after Atlanta, El Guerrouj went undefeated for 43 races, 4 years, just like Morcelli, leading up to the Sydney Games. It's one of the greatest athletic winning streaks of all time. Of course, track and field historians will know about Edwin Moses, the great 400-meter hurdler. I believe his record was 107 races in a row that he won over 400-meter hurdles, which is sensational. But when you're in those shorter races where you have your own lane, it's all about you and you executing and winning. But when you're talking about middle distances, when you're going up from 400 to 800, 1,500, 5,000, 10,000. That's when you have the tactics. That's when you have the possibility of getting boxed in. That's when you have the possibility of getting tripped at the bell lap and falling flat on your face. So that 43 race win streak is really something special, where he had to execute not only his fitness and his ability at the time being ready for peak performance, but also navigate all the potential pitfalls of middle distance racing. So it's time for the 2000 Sydney Olympics redemption opportunity for El Guerrouj in the 1,500 meters, and he's riding a 43 race win streak. Let's see what happens.
Australia to see the men's 1,500 meters. And Hicham El Guerrouj of Morocco has waited for this moment ever since Atlanta, when he fell in the final lap with a lap to go during the Olympic 1,500. He received a call from the King of Morocco encouraging him. This is the field that faces El Guerrouj, who has been nearly unbeatable since that night in Atlanta. He had to fend off a runner to his outside with his forearm there for a moment. And now his Moroccan teammate, Baba, comes up to take the lead.
So he has managed to arrange that this has the same look as a European race where he has a pace setter setting a fast pace for him.
So Youssef Baba has sacrificed his chances, no doubt, to help the hero of Morocco, Hicham El Guerrouj, just like at last year's World Championships, the tactics that paid off for them there.
2 Moroccans and then 2 Kenyans. Then there's the rest of the field. 54 seconds by the first 400 meters. That's good for El Guerrouj.
Okay, so what weirdness is going on here with the guy from Morocco in the front? What's happened is the team tactics of basically sacrificing a runner to improve the chances for El Guerrouj to win. Not that he really needed it. He's won 43 races in a row, and it turns out this guy screwed things up. So this teammate, who was fit enough to make it to the Olympic final, one of the best 1,500-meter runners in the world, but he was not a medal threat. So apparently, maybe it was King Hassan before he died, told El Guerrouj's teammate to take the race out hard. The goal here is to make it what's quote-unquote an honest race. In other words, a fast race rather than a tactical affair where you often see in championship meets, like you saw from that video in Atlanta, the giant pack still bunched up with 1 lap to go, people getting tangled, El Guerrouj falling flat on his face. That didn't happen when we saw the videos of the world records, right? Where the athletes were strung out like crazy from the very beginning because the speed was so fast. You always see single file when the speed is going fast. And so they wanted this to happen in the Olympic final so there would be no funny business or nobody sneaking up on El Guerrouj at the end because the pace had been so slow. But what this guy did was he kind of screwed it up. Let's see what happens.
Baba continues to lead El Guerrouj.
He let the pace lag. That was 6 seconds. That was a 60-second lap. So now we see the greatness of El Guerrouj. He's going to have to lead to ensure that he's going to have to lead the last 600 meters of the race. The 2 Kenyans look relaxed just following him. I've had a strange suspicion. I could be wrong, but I thought earlier in the year the Kenyans were holding something back in the earlier races. Why waste an upset if it's not the Olympics?
So he takes out the Olympic final at a pace of 54 seconds for the first 100 meters. That is way too fast. That's underneath world record pace. This is not a time to set world records. These guys had to qualify through the rounds and so forth. So 54, too fast. And then because it's so fast, even for him, is he slows things down in the second lap to a time of 60 seconds, which is way too slow. So way too fast at first, then way too slow. What happens, especially for the athletes further back in the pack, is they get to catch up, reform the pack, and completely negate any desire to orchestrate an honest race. Now it's just a mess. Everyone has caught their breath, regrouped, and now we have to, well, at this point, El Guerrouj has to continue to try to make it an honest race, so he's sort of obligated to lead. And when you're obligated to lead so far away from the finish line, the people who are following have a potential psychological as well as a physical advantage because they're able to draft, and you save a little bit of air resistance in running. Of course, in cycling, it's everything in the Tour de France. The drafting, the air resistance predicates the entire strategy of the sport. And in running, there's a little bit of a influence, but it's still a significant influence. In other words, it's easier to run right behind someone rather than lead, physically and psychologically, of course. Okay, here we go to the finish. Let's see what happens.
Hicham El Guerrouj of Morocco still in front. Noah Nyan of Kenya. Bernard Lagat of Kenya.
Yan is looking up on the screen to see if anybody's behind him. Does he have to move out to the second lane now, or can he wait? He's decided he can wait. It's going to happen in the final straightaway.
They're into the final turn. Hicham El Guerrouj. He's been nearly unbeatable at 1,500, but can he hold on to win here at the Olympics? He's getting a challenge now from Nguyen. El Guerrouj still has the lead. Nguyen up to challenge him, but can't get by. Now he pulls abreast. Does Guerrouj have enough? He does not. Nguyen goes by, and Nguyen of Kenya wins the gold. El Guerrouj, another disappointment, gets the silver, and Lagat of Kenya the bronze.
Well, El Guerrouj was forced by a couple of things to lead from way out. Being in lane one was a little bit of a problem, but he got his pace setter out there. The first lap was perfect. The second lap was terrible. Then El Guerrouj had to take the lead with more than 600 yards to go, and the Kenyans just sat and waited. We can only beat him if we surprise him at the end. If we go too soon, he'll beat us. They were learning all summer how to race against him when he was chasing world records and reinforcing how good he was by winning all the races with a pace setter, and they just set him up.
Olympic record time for Nguyen.
What happens is he got beaten by a fantastic athlete, a better man on the day. And I love this passage from the writer Duncan McKay that was published in The Guardian, trying to make sense of this. Quote, trying to erase the hurt of a last lap fall that ruined his chance to win the 1,500 meters in Atlanta in '96, the world record holder from Morocco was ambushed, this time by the Kenyan Noah Nyeni over the final few meters. As the scoreboard flashed Nyeni's winning time of 3:32, breaking Sebastian Coe's Olympic record, El Guerrouj sat on the track in stunned silence, drawing his knees up toward his chest. Oh, a silver medal was little consolation after being beaten by a quarter of a second. For minutes afterward, all you could hear was the loud, sobbing, tortured breath of a man who had just relived a nightmare. Hicham El Guerrouj, who for nearly 4 years was virtually unbeatable, had chosen the Olympic Games to suffer a defeat from which he may never recover. While the Kenyan set off on a lap of honor, El Guerrouj walked with his head down through a gauntlet of reporters, too embarrassed to approach him. He took his seat on a bench and doubled over, the pain escaping his slender frame in powerful shivers. For 10 minutes, as first the Moroccan team doctor and then his coach, Abel Kata, did their best to console him. He wept. All the while, camera shutters whirred and clicked. It was not the photograph he had expected to be taken. For 4 years, he has been carrying a picture of himself after the Atlanta defeat when he clipped the heels of eventual winner Morcelli and slumped down in disbelief. The Atlanta race in 1996 had seeped deep into his psyche, as we learned. Shouldering the burden of 30 million people, he finished in last place. Quote, "It was the end of the world. Every day I think of what happened. The memories have made me strong like steel." El Guerrouj has used those memories to drive him on, churning out the miles along Morocco's red-dusted roads. He had pushed himself to exhaustion, lived like a monk, sacrificed the pleasures of the flesh for his one moment. And he remembers before the Olympics, "I am like a soldier ready for battle." When he had wavered, he looked at that photo from Atlanta '96. He awakened to it every morning. Whether in his Spartan dormitory at the Moroccan National Training Center in Rabat, or in the sitting room of a more spacious villa nearby, which I guess he didn't spend much time in, or here in the Olympic Village in Sydney. He had planned to return from Stadium Australia, take down that photo, and replace it with one crossing the finish line triumphant. Now he will have to wait until 2004 for that chance, and it may be too late for a man who will be almost 30 by the time the Athens Olympic Games comes around. Oh, fuck. Oh. I mean, any athlete, you got to feel me here. Like, total domination in every race, 43 races in a row, setting records that are lasting for one generation, maybe two. I think sometimes back to my career when I was disappointed and had setbacks, and I'd ask the question, why me? Why me? Why did I have to have a flat tire at this important race in Australia and get knocked out of contention? Why did I have to have this other a misfortune where I became overtrained and exhausted and couldn't race at my best for a long time, blew another champ possibility for peak performance? And when I ask myself that once in a while in daily life. Why does this happen? Why does that happen? Why does this misfortune? Why me? And when I think about that now, I think about El Guh-ROOSH. If he who operates at a level far beyond what most of us can dream about, a level of dedication and wanting something so bad that we can't even relate, if he can come back and not get wallowed in self-pity and have why me ruin his day, if he can do it, all of us deserve to take that inspiration and get up from misfortune, or get up and smile again, put back on your running shoes and go out and put in some miles on the red dusted roads of Morocco. Oh, I mean, you have only a couple choices here as El Guh-ROOSH. What's an athlete going to do? My suggestion, it could be a good time to kind of tone down that obsessive pursuit of perfection, try to release the attachment of your self-esteem to the outcome, maybe attend some Buddhist meditation classes to become a more balanced spiritual person. I know I had those thoughts running through my mind when I was so dedicated and so competitive in my triathlon career. And then I'd suffer from misfortune, and I still had to fly home from Australia and try to make the best of it, have a good time, feel happy for my training partners who excelled when I didn't, and all those things that I had to work on and make myself get up out of that why me state and do something about it. But again, when those suggestions come into play, these are the exact opposite of what society demands of our most celebrated athletes. I talked about Kobe, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods. We don't care about them attending a meditation retreat and having spiritual insights and epiphanies that were just little tiny creatures on the big spinning orb of the planet. Oh, cameo from my spinning globe. Yeah, no. We want them to crush the competition, and we want to scream for them in the stands. And in Morocco, oh my gosh, imagine 30 million people counting on you, tuning in their TVs from Sydney to watch the great El Guh-ROOSH bring glory to the country. And once again, he gets smoked. Oh my goodness. I mean, that's pressure. That's expectation. It's not easy to attach your self-esteem to the outcome. But what did El Guh-ROOSH do as we go on the final segment of his career timeline, the road to Athens 2004 Olympics? He floored the gas pedal, man. He won those world titles that I gave you the spoiler in 2001 and 2003. He almost broke that sensational world record in the 1500. He ran 3:26:12 in Brussels in 2001. I didn't realize that. He won 3 consecutive Golden League prizes for track and field, so he's the best on the whole series of races throughout the year, 2001, 2002, 2003. He was the only middle distance athlete to produce the winning streak necessary to be entitled to a share of the Golden League jackpot, which was 50 kilograms of gold. Gold! That's over $1 million worth of gold. So if you can win all your races, you're competing against the athletes in all the events, you get to grab a share of that gold. He's the only athlete to have won the Golden League title 3 years in a row. In 2003, now we're a year before the Atlanta Games, he jumped up to the 5,000 meters. Remember, he was competing in that as a junior, but he pretty much focused on 1,500 mile during his professional career. So he went back up to the 5,000. Hello, 5,000, setting a fantastic personal best of 12 minutes 50 seconds, foretelling a move up to the higher distance at championship meets. In the 2003 World Championships, after winning gold in the 1,500, he also took second in the World Championships at 5,000 meters. Who did he lose to? Wait for it. That's right. Eliud Kipchoge, the greatest marathon runner of all times. So amazingly, the two athletes, the greatest miler, middle distance runner of all times, challenged the greatest marathoner of all times at that key point in their career. Kipchoge, of course, left track and field and went to dedicated marathon racing for many years after his start in the early 2000s at 5,000 and 10,000 meters. But they battled it out at the 2003 World Championships. And that brings us to the 2004 Athens Olympics. After a relatively poor start to the 2004 season, oh no, the greatest of all time doesn't have relatively poor starts to the season. Come on, he won 43 races in a row. Anyway, El Guerrouj put up some slow times and actually finished 8th place in a 1,500-meter race in Rome, the place where he sets his world records. El Guerrouj signed up for Athens Olympics in both the 1,500 and the 5,000 meters. Only 20 days before the Olympic final, at the final tune-up race, Olympic bronze medalist Bernard Lagat, he was representing Kenya at the time, he later represented America in competition, beat El Guerrouj, running the fastest 1,500 meters of 3:27. Just nipped him at the line in Zurich on August 6th. Head into the August 24th Olympic final in Sydney. Here we have another Kenyan coming on and primed for an upset. A little bit of pressure on El Guerrouj. Let's see what happened at the August 24th Olympic Games 1,500-meter finals.
Globally, it's fair to say that this is the most anticipated track race here. So will he be successful and then arguably the best ever? Or will he be the best never to win the 1,500?
And here comes one of the greatest celebrations you'll ever see in sports.
One more lap to go in the final of the 1,500. It's what we dreamed about, the Moroccan and the Kenyan. And wind it up he does. He's just off the rail, isn't he? Just off the plinth. 300 out. Leggett sits. Hesh goes third. And then Esteviz and Silva's running on behind them. El Guerrouj leads by a metre. Leggett's close. Hesh and then Silva. Kenny hang on. Leggett to attack. Does Hicham have one last kick? Can he go from champion to legend? Or has Lagat got him? Or could Silva catch both of them? El Guerrouj's tackle. Lagat goes up and takes the lead. El Guerrouj can't quite hold him. Lagat's in front, but he's coming back, the champ. El Guerrouj is coming back. He is a legend. How sweet it is. He goes from the greatest never to the best of all time.
I also think this is one of the great moments of sportsmanship in Olympic history. You can see the reaction so clearly from the other athletes that they know this guy is the greatest of all time. This is the guy they've been chased, have gained so much inspiration from. The younger athletes worship the guy probably as they were coming up and dreaming of competing on the international stage, and they're so happy for him. They're so beyond the normal happiness of an opponent who you just recently wanted to kick his ass, and now you're beyond happy for him. How do you win the Olympic gold? How about smoking that final 800 meters in an unbelievable, unprecedented time? The screen said 53.2 for his second to last lap, and the stadium announcer right after the race, you can hear him saying 51.9 for his final lap. So he ran approximately 145 to 146 for his final 800 meters of a 1,500 meter race. That is a time that is good for making the Olympic final in 800 meters. So forget the warm-up of almost half a mile. He's smoking the final 2 laps. This is known as a squeeze, and a squeeze is how you win the Olympic gold. Squeezing the life out of the other competitors with a long, sustained increase in speed and dare daring anyone to try and keep up. This is what a decade of living like a monk for 11 months a year in the training center and putting in all those miles and all those intervals where you can step on the gas pedal halfway through a race and close in Olympic caliber time. And what a choke by the announcer. Sorry, Marty, you're a great announcer, but how far off can you get with his little comment? The Ukrainian has the fastest final 100 meters. We better watch out for the Ukrainian. No, not when you're running 53 and then coming back with another 52. That's what you get from 15 years of elite training. Goodbye, Ukrainian, with a fast final finish. But of course, you know what Marty was talking about because you see it in other races all the time, where if dudes are allowed to hang around in a pace that is not high world record elite caliber, strange things can happen in the final 100 meters. It seems like that's what championship racing has been all about lately. We just saw the world championships from Tokyo and some amazing surprise upset winners. The Frenchman Jimmy Gressier winning the 10,000 meters over all the favorites with this savage finishing kick at the finish line. But he's not the next guy that's going to break the world record when you're going all out and seeing who's the fittest and best trained. That's clearly El Guerrouj. So he needed that honest race, and he needed to put the squeeze down on everyone. The best man won that race for sure. And what a fantastic Hollywood ending, because as a matter of fact, El Guerrouj retired soon after the Olympics. That was his final international competition. Oh, wait. It's not over yet. Remember I mentioned he entered the 5,000 meters as well. So let's go back to Olympic coverage and see what happens 4 days later in Athens 5,000 meter finals, 2004 Olympic Games.
1 lap to go. The long run for home. This will be a famous last lap, whatever happens. Kipchoge, Bekele, El Guerrouj. Gebre Montrum is in 7th place. El Guerrouj has running room now. Bekele sits on Kipchoge. El Guerrouj, Gebre Bekele goes past Kipchoge. El Guerrouj waits, and Bekele goes, and El Guerrouj has a chance, I reckon.
So this is another epic showdown because Kenenisa Bekele of Ethiopia went on to become the greatest long-distance runner of his era and arguably one of the greatest ever. He's certainly done some extraordinary things now that make him off the charts. I mean, in his peak on the track, he busted all the world records, 5,000, 10,000, multiple Olympic World Championship golds, and he kept going, moving into the marathon, as a lot of athletes do at the tail end of the career. They leave the track, they go to the longer races. But he continued, and at age 41, ran a 2:04 marathon, one of the fastest in the world. He's still going strong at age 43 with the quote, "At my age, it's still possible to run a faster time if I don't get injuries and train well. I think I can run 2:01 again," which is, one of the greatest times ever. "My energy is good and I'm feeling strong in training," end quote from Kenenisa Bekele, 43-year-old machine. So let's see what happens with El Guerrouj battling the great Bekele of Ethiopia.
Bekele's a metre in front. He's so strong. El Guerrouj, we know what he did in the 1500. He might do it again. He's summoning up the strength. The gods are with him. He goes to Bekele. Bekele fights back. But El Guerrouj is going to do what Pavo Nurmi did in 1924. Greatest 1500-metre runner ever. Nearly the greatest distance runner you've ever seen.
With this historic victory, El Guerrouj became the first man in 80 years to win both the 1500 and the 5,000 meters at the same Olympics, previously achieved only by the great flying Finn Paavo Nurmi in 1924. Having fulfilled his sporting ambitions and due to injuries from years of high-intensity training, El Guerrouj never competed again internationally after the Athens Olympics. Almost 3 decades later here, as I make this video, the 2 big records still stand, but the athletes are getting close. Jakob Ingebrigtsen and Yared Nuguse hit 3:43 for the mile at the Pre-Classic in 2023, and Jakob ran a 3:26.7 in the 1500 meters. So, of course, records are made to be broken in the progression of sporting and training. But I should also comment at this point, and many track and field experts concur, that the invention of the super spikes the carbon-plated advanced material, advanced foam technology that now allows for greater efficiency and energy return while running, deliver a decided advantage to running economy such that the times really have an asterisk when compared to the spikes of a previous era. This is especially true running on the roads with these super shoes, but experts contend that the carbon-plated super spikes can deliver a 1 to 2% improvement in running economy, which can lead to perhaps a 3-second advantage when racing the mile at world-class speeds. So that's just another plug for El Guerrouj being once in a generation, once in a lifetime athlete. What happens with the super spikes? I talk about the energy return. So you have a more efficient stride with that carbon plate. So you get a bit of improvement in stride length. And you can go do a calculation, ask ChatGPT, if your stride lengthens 1 inch over the course of a mile, how much faster is that? It starts to add up. Forget about a marathon. It's several minutes improvement in a marathon from wearing the super shoes. And it also, because of the pre-contoured position of the spike, it's called toe spring. It preloads the foot into that explosive position for takeoff. There's less foot strain, foot fatigue. That's why you don't want to train in these types of shoes all the time, because it will weaken your feet. Your foot has to do less work to still run fast. But when it's time to race, the super spikes provide a decided advantage. So considering the tech improvements, here's what Ray Flynn thinks. He's an Irishman who was one of the world's greatest milers back in my day. Now he's a top track and field agent. He says, quote, 100 years from now, he's talking back in El Guerrouj's time, so 20 years ago. 100 years from now, the mile record will be 2 or 3 seconds lower than it is today, no more. El Guerrouj agreed back then. 2 or 3 seconds maximum, he says in French, and then in English, maximum. He also said in the same conversation that he believed he was the guy that was going to lower the record 2 seconds down to 3:41 that very summer. But alas, 3:43 holds very, very strong. I'm going to predict that Jakob will be the guy who breaks the record, because he is another generational athlete that has that tremendous focus, that drive, that competitive intensity, living that beautiful, highly dedicated lifestyle. And he also has that evolved competitive disposition where he too can handle defeat and setbacks, and has that nice, not just a hardcore win or die mentality, but a more nuanced mentality where he can be a top competitor. He loves to race. He showed up at world championships even after having an injury the whole year. He didn't perform at his best, but he gets tremendous credit for just showing up and competing. Hey, maybe that's another video someday to highlight the great career of Jakob Ingebrigtsen. But I want to close this with a beautiful quote from El Guerrouj that sums up everything that he's been through and will leave you with tremendous inspiration for living it in your own life. This is his reflecting on his career. Quote, "The values of life are work, patience, defeat, learning from defeat, perseverance, and regularity. And all that I learned with sport, and above all, from my Olympic journey," end quote. Thank you so much for watching and celebrating the great career of El Guerrouj with me. One must never forget El Guerrouj.